They say you should never judge a book by its cover, but apparently nobody told the Petrov family that particular wisdom. I learned this the hard way at what my wife Zoya called our proper introduction dinner, though looking back, it felt more like a corporate performance review, where I was the underperforming employee about to get terminated. The restaurant was one of those places where the waiters wear bow ties and the wine costs more than most people's car payments. Zoya had insisted we meet at Chez Laurent, claiming it was appropriate for the occasion. I should have known something was wrong when she spent 3 hours getting ready and kept checking her reflection in every mirror we passed. "Porter, darling, I want you to meet my uncle Mikhail," she said, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she reserved for social climbing. "He's the senior vice president at First National Bank." Uncle Mikhail, or Mick as he apparently preferred, was exactly what you'd expect from a man who wore his authority like an expensive cologne. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of handshake that lingered just long enough to establish dominance. His wife Vera sat beside him, her jewelry catching the restaurant's ambient lighting like tiny spotlights announcing her status. "And these are his parents," Zoya continued, gesturing toward an elderly couple who radiated the kind of old money confidence that comes from generations of never having to check price tags. "Mr. and Mrs. Petrov Sr. He's the bank president." The old man looked me up and down like I was a used car he was considering purchasing. His wife simply nodded, the gesture so minimal it barely qualified as acknowledgement. "So you're the famous Porter," Mick said, settling into his chair with the casual authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Zoya's told us so much about you." I caught the emphasis on "so much" and felt my internal warning system start humming. This wasn't going to be a pleasant evening. "All good things, I hope," I replied, keeping my tone light despite the growing tension in my shoulders. Vera laughed, a sound like ice cubes clinking in an empty glass. "Oh, she's been quite thorough in her descriptions." The waiter appeared with menus that looked more like leather-bound novels. I ordered a beer, which earned me a raised eyebrow from Mrs. Petrov Sr. and a barely concealed wince from Zoya. The rest of the table ordered wine with names I couldn't pronounce and prices that could fund a small vacation. "So, Porter," the bank president said, leaning forward with the predatory interest of a loan shark sizing up a debtor, "tell us about your background. What university did you attend?" "State University," I answered honestly. "Got my degree in finance and economics." The silence that followed was so profound, I could hear the kitchen staff clattering dishes 3 rooms away. "State University," Mick repeated slowly, as if testing how the words tasted. "That's interesting. Not exactly what we'd call a prestigious institution." "Some random university?" Vera added with a dismissive wave. "I'm not even sure I've heard of it." I felt Zoya shift beside me, and for a moment I thought she might defend me. Instead, she laughed, a nervous, apologetic sound that made my stomach clench. "Well, it's not like he went to Harvard or Yale," she said, her tone suggesting this was somehow my personal failing rather than a simple fact of geography and finances. The bank president pulled out his phone and began typing. "Let me look this up," he announced. "State University. Oh yes, here it is. Ranked somewhere in the middle of, well, everything really, not particularly notable for anything." "The acceptance rate is quite high," Mrs. Petrov Sr. observed, reading over her husband's shoulder. "Practically anyone can get in." I took a long drink of my beer and reminded myself that assault charges would complicate my evening significantly. "It served my purposes," I said instead. "And what exactly are those purposes?" Mick asked. "What do you do for work?" "I'm a financial consultant." "Consultant," Vera repeated, making it sound like a communicable disease. "How vague. What kind of consulting?" "Investment analysis, portfolio management, risk assessment for high net worth clients." Mick exchanged a glance with his father. "High net worth clients? Really? And where do you find these clients?" Referrals mostly. Word of mouth. How convenient, the bank president said. No verifiable track record, no institutional backing, just word of mouth. The appetizers arrived, giving me a moment to collect my thoughts and resist the urge to educate these people about the difference between institutional employment and independent consulting. Instead, I watched Zoya carefully arrange her salad while avoiding eye contact. You know, Mrs. Petrov Sr. said, delicately spearing a piece of lettuce. When Zoya first told us she was married, we assumed she'd found someone suitable. Someone with prospects, Vera added helpfully. Someone from a good family, Mick continued, with connections, education, a future. Instead, the bank president concluded, we get someone who went to some random university and calls himself a consultant. Zoya finally looked up from her salad. Porter's very dedicated, she said weakly. Dedicated, Mick repeated. That's one way to put it, I suppose. I realized this wasn't a family dinner. This was an intervention. They weren't trying to get to know me. They were building a case for why Zoya should trade up to a better model. The thing is, Vera said, leaning forward conspiratorially, Zoya is such a catch. Beautiful, intelligent, well-connected through the family. She could have anyone. Anyone, Mrs. Petrov Sr. agreed. Someone worthy of her. Someone who could provide the lifestyle she deserves, the bank president added. I looked at my wife, waiting for her to object, to defend our marriage, to show even the slightest indication that she disagreed with this character assassination. Instead, she nodded slowly. I do sometimes wonder, Zoya said quietly, what it would be like to be with someone more established. The words hit me like a physical blow. I set down my beer carefully, using the moment to process what I'd just heard. Someone with real credentials, Mick continued, apparently encouraged by Zoya's response. Someone who went to a proper university, works for a reputable firm, has a future we can be proud of. Someone temporary can always be replaced, Vera said with a smile that would have made a shark nervous. It's not like you're stuck with your first choice forever. Zoya's nod was barely perceptible, but I caught it. The message was clear. I was temporary. A placeholder husband until something better came along. The main courses arrived, but I'd lost my appetite. The waiter set the plates down with practiced precision, the smell of grilled meat and buttered vegetables briefly filling the air, but it did nothing for me. I picked at my steak while the Petrov family continued their systematic demolition of my character, my education, my career, and my worthiness as a human being. Each comment landed neatly on top of the last, calibrated and confident. Zoya said nothing in my defense. If anything, she seemed to be taking mental notes, her expression thoughtful, as though this were a useful briefing rather than an indictment of her husband. You know what I think? The bank president said as he cut into his salmon, his knife gliding effortlessly through the pink flesh. I think Zoya deserves better. Much better. He didn't look at me when he said it, as if my presence no longer required acknowledgement. Absolutely, Mick agreed, leaning back in his chair with easy authority. She's wasting her prime years on someone who can't provide for her properly. He said it casually, the way one might comment on the weather. Someone who went to some random university, Mrs. Petrov Sr. added, apparently finding this fact endlessly amusing. She smiled thinly over the rim of her wineglass, savoring the line as if it were particularly clever. I watched Zoya nod along with their assessment and felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet, but a precise, quiet resolve. They wanted to treat me like a nobody? Fine, but first, I had some business to conduct. You know, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket, my voice cutting cleanly through the noise. Since we're talking about my inadequacies, there's something I should probably take care of. The table stilled, curiosity flickering briefly before amusement reclaimed its place. I pulled out my pen and looked around the table. Could I borrow a piece of paper? I need to close my account at your bank. I said it evenly, as though I were asking for the salt. The laughter started with Vera, a delighted giggle that suggested she found my gesture adorable in its futility. Mick joined in almost immediately, his laugh louder, sharper, followed by his parents'. Even Zoya smiled, a small, indulgent curve of her lips, apparently amused by what she saw as my petty response to their criticism. "Oh, that's precious," Mrs. Petrov Sr. said, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. "He's going to close his little account." Her tone was indulgent, patronizing, final. "How much could it possibly be?" Vera asked, tilting her head. "A few thousand? Maybe 10 if he's been really saving up?" She glanced at me with open curiosity, as though genuinely speculating. Mick was practically wheezing with laughter. "This is perfect. The random university graduate is going to show us by taking his lunch money somewhere else." He shook his head, delighted. I waited for their amusement to die down before speaking again, letting the laughter exhaust itself. Forks clinked, glasses settled, breaths were taken. "Actually, could you call someone from the bank? I'll need proper documentation for this transaction." I folded my hands loosely in front of me. "Transaction?" the bank president asked, wiping tears from his eyes, still smiling. "Son, you don't need documentation to close a checking account with pocket change in it." "I think I do for this one," I said calmly. Something in my tone must have penetrated their hilarity because Mick stopped laughing and pulled out his phone. "Fine, I'll call the night manager. This should be entertaining." While we waited, the family continued their commentary on my presumed financial situation. They speculated about my account balance with the casual cruelty of people who had never worried about money and couldn't imagine anyone at their table having more than they did. The night manager arrived 20 minutes later, a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit who clearly wasn't happy about being called to a restaurant on a Saturday evening. Mick introduced him as David and explained the situation with barely contained amusement. "Mr. Keller would like to close his account," Mick said. "Can you help him with that?" David looked confused, but pulled out his tablet. "Of course, sir. I'll just need some identification and account information." I handed over my driver's license and waited while he looked up my account. The change in his expression was immediate and dramatic. His eyes widened, then narrowed as he double-checked the screen. "Is there a problem?" I asked innocently. "No, sir," David said quickly, his entire demeanor shifting to something approaching reverence. "No problem at all. I just need to verify. This is quite a substantial account." "How substantial?" Vera asked, her laughter fading. David glanced nervously between me and the Petrov family. "I'm not sure I should discuss specific amounts in public." "It's fine," I said. "They're family." David cleared his throat and looked at his tablet again. "The account balance is $7,437,612.43. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Vera's fork clattered against her plate. Mick's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. Mrs. Petrov Sr.'s mouth fell open in a way that would have been comical under different circumstances. "7 million?" Zoya whispered. "And change," I confirmed. The bank president leaned forward, his earlier condescension replaced by something approaching panic. "Now let's not be hasty here. There's no need to make any rash decisions." "Oh, I think there is," I said, taking the account closure form from David's trembling hands. "You see, you were right about one thing. I am temporary, but so is my business relationship with your bank." I signed the withdrawal authorization with deliberate care, confirmed my identity with my passport, and selected immediate transfer to my private trust account at a competing institution. The compliance paperwork I'd prepared in advance made the process smooth and irreversible. "Wait," Mick said, his voice cracking slightly. "Let's discuss this. There's no need to be emotional about this." "Emotional?" I repeated, handing the completed forms back to David. "I'm being practical. Why would I keep my money at a bank where the senior management thinks I'm unworthy of basic respect? David's tablet chimed as the transfer processed. $7 million moving from First National to their biggest competitor in the space of 5 minutes. The transfer is complete, David announced, his voice barely above a whisper. I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and left enough cash on the table to cover my portion of the dinner. Thank you all for a very educational evening. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Zoya call my name, but I didn't turn around. The temporary husband was leaving the building, and he was taking his random university education and his $7 million with him. The valet brought my car around, a modest sedan that had served me well and never once made me feel inadequate. As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, I reflected on the evening's revelations. My wife thought I was temporary. Her family thought I was worthless. They'd all had a good laugh at my expense. But the laughter had stopped when the account balance appeared on that tablet. $7 million had a way of changing perspectives, even for people who thought they were above caring about money. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the dark for a moment, processing what had just happened. My marriage was over. That much was clear. Zoya had made her position obvious, and the Petrov family had made their feelings unmistakable. The question now was what I was going to do about it. Inside the house, everything looked exactly the same as when we'd left for dinner 3 hours earlier. Same furniture, same pictures on the walls, same life we'd built together over 5 years of marriage. But something fundamental had shifted, and there was no going back. I poured myself a drink and sat in my home office, staring at the computer screen without really seeing it. $7 million. They'd never bothered to ask how I'd accumulated that much money, or what kind of consulting generated that kind of return. They'd simply assumed I was nobody special because I didn't fit their narrow definition of success. Their mistake. And mistakes, as I'd learned in my years as a financial consultant, always came with consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoya. "We need to talk when you get home." I looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. We'd done enough talking for one evening. Now it was time for action. Zoya came home at 2 a.m, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with the irregular rhythm of someone trying to be quiet and failing spectacularly. I was still in my office, ostensibly reading financial reports, but actually planning my next moves with the methodical precision that had made me successful in business and would serve me well in the dissolution of my marriage. "Porter?" she called softly, probably hoping I was asleep. "In here," I replied without looking up from my computer. She appeared in the doorway, still wearing the dress she'd chosen for our disastrous family dinner. Her makeup was smudged, and she had the slightly disheveled look of someone who'd spent the evening having intense conversations in dimly lit bars. "We should talk about tonight," she said, hovering in the doorway like she wasn't sure whether she was welcome in my office anymore. "Should we?" I asked, finally looking up. "I thought your family made their position quite clear, and you seemed to agree with their assessment." She moved into the room and perched on the edge of the chair across from my desk. "They can be intense, but they mean well." "Intense," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it? Porter, you have to understand their perspective. They want what's best for me. And what's best for you apparently doesn't include being married to someone who went to some random university." Zoya sighed and looked down at her hands. "It's not about the university. It's about compatibility, social compatibility." "Ah," I said, "social compatibility. That's a polite way of saying I don't fit in with your crowd." "You don't," she said quietly, and tonight proved it. I leaned back in my chair and studied my wife's face. 5 years of marriage, and I was just now seeing her clearly. "Tell me something, Zoya. When did you decide I was temporary?" Her head snapped up, and for a moment I saw something that might have been guilt flash across her features. I never said you were temporary. You didn't have to say it. You nodded when Vera suggested it. You agreed when they said you could do better. You sat there while they systematically tore me apart and said nothing in my defense. I was trying to keep the peace. No, I said, standing up and walking to the window. You were trying to avoid choosing sides, but your silence was a choice, and we both know which side you chose. The neighborhood was quiet at this hour, streetlights casting pools of yellow light on empty sidewalks. I'd always liked this house, this street, this life we'd built together. But apparently, I'd been the only one who was happy with it. The money, Zoya said suddenly. $7 million, Porter. Where did that come from? I turned back to face her. You never asked before. I never thought... you always seemed so... ordinary, I suggested. Unremarkable? Like someone who went to some random university? That's not what I meant. Isn't it? I returned to my desk and opened my laptop. You want to know where the money came from? I'll show you. I turned the screen toward her, displaying my investment portfolio. I started consulting right out of college, small clients at first, people who couldn't afford the big firms but needed help managing their money. I charged reasonable fees and delivered exceptional results. She leaned forward, squinting at the numbers on the screen. Word spread, I continued, scrolling through client accounts. Successful people talk to other successful people. My client base grew, and so did the complexity of the work. I started handling larger portfolios, more sophisticated investments. This shows millions in assets under management, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 43 million, to be precise. I charge a percentage of returns above market benchmarks. When you consistently beat the market by 8 to 12% annually, that percentage adds up quickly. Zoya stared at the screen in silence, processing the implications of what she was seeing. The 7 million in the bank account? That's just my liquid reserves. My actual net worth is considerably higher, but it's tied up in investments, real estate, and business ventures. Why didn't you ever tell me this? I closed the laptop and looked at her directly. Because I thought you married me for who I was, not what I had. Apparently, I was wrong on both counts. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the bookshelf and back. This changes everything. Does it? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it changes nothing. You still think I'm beneath your family's standards. You still believe you could do better. The only difference is now you know I have money. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair would have been defending your husband when your family attacked him. Fair would have been telling them that regardless of where I went to school or how much money I have, you chose to marry me, and you were happy with that choice. Zoya stopped pacing and faced me. I am happy. I was happy. Past tense noted, I said. Porter, please, can't we just forget about tonight? Pretend it never happened? No, I said simply. We can't. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her options. The woman who'd sat silently while her family demolished my character was now calculating whether it was worth salvaging a marriage to someone who turned out to be wealthier than she'd imagined. What do you want me to do? She asked finally. Nothing, I said. There's nothing you can do. You showed me who you are tonight, and I believe you. So that's it? 5 years of marriage over because of one dinner? 5 years of marriage over because you agreed with your family that I was temporary and you could do better. The dinner was just where you chose to make that position clear. Zoya's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it reflexively. The slight smile that crossed her face before she caught herself told me everything I needed to know about who was texting her at 2:30 in the morning. Go ahead, I said. Answer it. It's nothing important. Answer it, Zoya. She looked at the phone again, then at me, clearly torn between maintaining her pretense and responding to whoever was trying to reach her. It's just Natasha, she said finally. She's probably checking to make sure I got home safely. Natasha, I repeated. Your best friend who was conspicuously absent from tonight's family gathering. The same Natasha who's been encouraging you to explore your options for the past 6 months. Zoya's face went pale. How do you know about that? Because I pay attention, I said. I notice when my wife starts working late 3 nights a week. I notice when she starts going to the gym at unusual hours. I notice when she stops wearing her wedding ring because it gets in the way during workouts. She looked down at her bare left hand as if seeing it for the first time. I notice when she starts receiving text messages that make her smile in ways I haven't seen in months. I notice when she starts talking about people at work I've never heard of before. Porter, tell me about Marcus, I said quietly. The color drained completely from her face. What? Marcus Radek, IT manager at the bank. 36 years old, divorced, drives a red sports car, and spends most of his free time at the gym. The same gym where you've been spending so much time lately. Zoya sank back into the chair, her phone still buzzing insistently in her hand. Answer the phone, Zoya. Tell Marcus you made it home safely from the dinner where your family convinced you to upgrade your husband. She stared at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been fear. How long have you known? Long enough, I said. The question is, how long has it been going on? It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been having an affair with someone you met through your family's bank connections. Someone who fits their definition of suitable. Someone who can provide the social compatibility you've been missing. Her phone stopped buzzing, then immediately started again. He's persistent, I observed. You should probably answer before he decides to drive over here to check on you. Zoya looked at the phone, then at me, her internal conflict playing out across her face in real time. Go ahead, I said again. I already know the truth. At this point, honesty would be refreshing. She answered the phone on the 4th ring. Hi, she said softly, turning away from me as if that would provide some privacy. I could hear Marcus's voice through the speaker, asking about the dinner, asking if she was okay, asking when he could see her again. Zoya's responses were carefully neutral, but the intimacy in her tone was unmistakable. I can't talk right now, she said finally. I'll call you tomorrow. She ended the call and set the phone on my desk, her hand trembling slightly. How long? I asked again. 3 months, she whispered. 3 months, I repeated. And tonight was supposed to be what? The final push to convince you to leave me. It wasn't planned like that, wasn't it? Your family tears me apart, you agree with their assessment, and coincidentally you've been having an affair with someone they'd approve of. That seems like quite a coincidence. Zoya stood up again, her composure finally cracking. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My family, the social expectations, the way people look at us when we're together. The way people look at us? You don't fit, Porter. You never have. I thought I could live with that, but Marcus fits better. He understands my world. He knows the people I know, goes to the places I go. He doesn't make me feel like I have to choose between my husband and my family. So you chose him. I chose myself, she said, lifting her chin with a defiance that would have been admirable under different circumstances. I nodded slowly, processing her admission. Well, at least now we're being honest. What happens now? She asked. Now you pack a bag and go stay with Natasha, or Marcus. I don't really care which. Porter, please. Can't we work this out? The money changes things. We could have a different kind of life. The kind of life where your family respects me because I have money instead of despising me because I don't fit their social requirements? Yes, she said, apparently missing the trap in my question. The kind of life where you stay married to me for my portfolio instead of leaving me for my inadequacies? That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. And it's exactly why this marriage is over. Zoya stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating one last time whether there was an angle she hadn't considered, a way to salvage this situation to her advantage. "The house," she said finally. "The assets. I'm entitled to half of everything." And there it was, the real Zoya, the one who'd been hiding behind 5 years of marriage vows and social pretenses. Not the woman who'd made a mistake, not the wife who'd been influenced by family pressure, but the calculating opportunist who'd just realized she might be walking away from millions of dollars. "We'll see about that," I said calmly. "What do you mean?" "I mean you should probably get a very good lawyer. You're going to need one." She picked up her phone and headed for the door, then turned back. "You know, if you'd just told me about the money from the beginning, none of this would have happened." "You're absolutely right," I said. "If I'd led with my bank balance instead of expecting you to love me for who I am, we could have had a perfectly transactional marriage based on mutual financial benefit. My mistake." Zoya left without another word, and I heard her moving around upstairs, packing a bag with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this departure for weeks. When the front door closed behind her 20 minutes later, I poured myself another drink and returned to my computer. I had work to do, and it had nothing to do with financial consulting. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thanks for the car, loser. Zoya says hi." Attached was a photo of Marcus behind the wheel of my BMW, with Zoya in the passenger seat, both of them smiling at the camera. Marcus was holding up his middle finger. I stared at the photo for a long moment, then saved it to my phone and forwarded it to my lawyer with a message. "Evidence for the divorce proceedings. More to follow." Then I opened a new document on my computer and began typing. If Marcus and Zoya wanted to play games, I was happy to oblige. But they were about to discover that some games have rules, and breaking those rules came with consequences they hadn't considered. The temporary husband was about to become a permanent problem. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that usually made me optimistic about the week ahead. Today, however, my optimism had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the phone calls I'd been making since 6 a.m. My first call was to my lawyer, Rebecca Martinez, who specialized in high-asset divorce cases and had a reputation for protecting her clients' interests with the tenacity of a pit bull guarding a bone. "7 million liquid and how much total?" she asked, her voice sharp with interest. "Conservative estimate? 15 million. But that's before we factor in the business valuation and some investments that are difficult to quantify. And she's been having an affair for 3 months. 3 months that she admitted to. Could be longer. Do you have evidence?" "Photos, text messages, and she's currently staying at his apartment. I can provide addresses, phone records, whatever you need." Rebecca's laugh was predatory. "Porter, I think I'm going to enjoy this case. Give me 24 hours to review the prenup and start building our strategy." "About the prenup," I said. "We didn't sign one." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "You have $15 million and you got married without a prenup?" Rebecca finally asked. "I didn't have $15 million when we got married. I had about $2 million then, and I thought—" I paused, realizing how naive I'd been. "I thought she loved me." "Right. Well, that complicates things, but it doesn't make them impossible. Adultery still matters in this state, especially when we can prove financial planning around the affair." "Financial planning?" "Trust me, they're not just having an affair. They're planning a future together, which means they're planning for your money to be part of that future. We'll prove it." My second call was to my business partner, Eddie Kowalski, who handled the operational side of our consulting firm while I focused on client relations and investment strategy. The office around me was still, blinds half drawn against the morning light, the city outside already moving at a pace I wasn't ready to match. "You're taking a leave of absence?" Eddie asked. I could picture him leaning back in his chair, pen already paused mid-note. "Porter, we've got the Henderson portfolio review next week, and the Morrison account is expecting their quarterly report. Handle Henderson yourself. Morrison can wait a month. I need to deal with some personal issues. I stared at a spot on the wall where the paint had chipped years ago and never been fixed. Personal issues that require you to disappear from the business? His voice sharpened, concern threading through irritation. Personal issues that require my full attention and a very specific skill set that has nothing to do with financial consulting. I kept my tone flat, controlled. Eddie had known me long enough to recognize the tone in my voice. There was a brief silence on the line. What kind of skill set? The kind I learned in the army before I became a respectable businessman. I could almost hear him exhale. Porter, please tell me you're not planning to do anything stupid. I'm not planning to do anything illegal, I said carefully, choosing each word. Stupid is a matter of perspective. The line stayed quiet for a beat longer than usual. All right, Eddie finally said. I'll cover things. Just handle whatever it is. My third call was to my old army buddy, Tony Ricci, who now worked as a private investigator specializing in corporate security and domestic cases. The call connected on the second ring. You need surveillance on your wife and her boyfriend? Tony asked after I laid it out. Porter, that's pretty standard stuff. Any PI in the phone book could handle it. I don't need standard stuff, Tony. I need comprehensive background checks, financial records, employment history, social media analysis, and real-time monitoring of their activities. I watched the clock on my desk tick forward, steady and relentless. That's more extensive than usual. This isn't a usual situation. What aren't you telling me? His tone shifted, the humor draining out of it. I'm telling you everything you need to know. Can you do it or not? I can do it. But it's going to cost you. Money isn't an issue. In that case, I can have preliminary reports by Wednesday and full workups by Friday. Perfect. My fourth call was to the bank where Zoya worked, specifically to the Human Resources Department. The automated menu felt interminable before a woman finally picked up. I'd like to report a potential ethics violation. I told the HR representative who answered the phone, my voice calm, almost clinical. What kind of ethics violation, sir? I have reason to believe that 2 employees are engaged in a romantic relationship that may be affecting their professional judgment and potentially creating conflicts of interest. Can you be more specific? Zoya Kellor and Marcus Radek. Mrs. Kellor is married to someone outside the bank, and their relationship appears to be affecting bank business. I see. And you are? Mrs. Keller's husband. The pause that followed was exactly what I'd expected. I imagined her fingers hovering over the keyboard, uncertainty flickering across her face. Sir, I'm not sure that domestic disputes fall under our ethics policies. They do when one party is using bank resources to facilitate an extramarital affair, and when that affair involves someone in a position to access confidential client information. I kept my breathing even. We'll look into it, the HR representative said, her tone suddenly more professional, more guarded. I'm sure you will. By 9 a.m., I'd set the wheels in motion for what Rebecca had called aggressive divorce proceedings, and what I preferred to think of as consequences for poor decision-making. The plan was taking shape with a clarity that felt almost comforting. At 9:15, my phone rang. Porter? Zoya's voice was strained, and I could hear traffic in the background. We need to talk. Do we? The bank called me into HR this morning. Someone reported me for ethics violations. That's unfortunate. Porter, did you call my job? I called the bank to report a potential ethics violation involving 2 employees. Whether that affects your job depends on how the investigation goes. You can't do this. Actually, I can. Ethics policies exist for a reason, and banks take them very seriously, especially when there's potential for conflicts of interest or misuse of company resources. I never misused company resources. Are you sure about that? Because I'm betting a thorough investigation will find company emails, company phones, maybe even company time being used to facilitate your relationship with Marcus. The silence on her end told me I'd guessed correctly. This is petty, she said finally. This is practical. You wanted to upgrade your husband? Fine. But upgrades come with costs, and you're about to learn what those costs are. I'm coming over tonight to get more of my things. No, you're not. It's my house, too. It's a house that I purchased before our marriage, with money I earned before our marriage, and it's going to remain my house after our marriage ends. You can coordinate with my lawyer if you need to retrieve personal items. Porter, please. Can't we be civilized about this? Civilized? I repeated. Like sitting quietly while your family tore me apart? Like agreeing that I was temporary and you could do better? Like having an affair for 3 months and then stealing my car to send me pictures of your new boyfriend? We didn't steal your car. You took my car without permission to go joyriding with your boyfriend. In most states, that's called theft. You're being ridiculous. I'm being thorough. There's a difference. What do you want, Porter? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You chose to have an affair. You chose to humiliate me in front of your family. You chose to treat our marriage like a temporary arrangement until something better came along. Now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. And what exactly are those consequences? You'll find out. I ended the call and immediately dialed Tony's number. Change of plans, I told him. I need that surveillance to start immediately, and I need you to expand the investigation to include financial records for both of them, employment history, social media going back 2 years, and any evidence of joint planning or shared expenses. You want me to build a case for fraud? I want you to build a case for whatever the evidence supports. If that's fraud, so be it. Porter, what exactly are you planning here? I'm planning to make sure that people who think they can use and discard other people learn that some people don't discard easily. At 11 a.m., I received a call from an unknown number. Is this Porter Keller? The voice was young, male, and carried the kind of aggressive confidence that usually indicated someone who'd never been punched in the face. Who's asking? This is Marcus. I think we should meet. Do you? Yeah, man to man. We should talk about this situation with Zoya. What situation is that? Come on, man. Don't make this harder than it has to be. She's moving on. You should too. Moving on to you mean? That's right. Look, I get that this sucks for you, but it's happening whether you accept it or not. The question is whether we handle this like adults or whether you keep acting like a child. Acting like a child? Calling her job, threatening her, trying to make her life difficult, that's not going to change anything. She's done with you. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time in days. Marcus, I appreciate the call. It's very illuminating. So, you'll back off? I'll tell you what. Let's do meet. Man to man, as you put it. Good. When and where? How about the gym where you and Zoya have been spending so much quality time together? Today at 6? Perfect. And Porter, don't make this weird, okay? We're all adults here. Absolutely, I said. Adult behavior all around. After I hung up, I made one more call. Tony, I need you to meet me at Platinum Fitness on 5th Street at 5:45 tonight. Bring a camera with a good zoom lens. What are we documenting? A conversation between adults. Porter, please tell me you're not planning to do anything that's going to get you arrested. I'm not planning to do anything illegal, but I am planning to do something memorable. At 5:30, I changed into workout clothes and drove to the gym where my wife had been conducting her affair. Platinum Fitness was exactly what you'd expect from a place that charged $200 a month for membership. All chrome and mirrors and equipment that looked more like modern art than exercise machines. Marcus was easy to spot. He was the guy in the tank top that was 2 sizes too small, doing bicep curls in front of the mirror while checking himself out from every possible angle. He was also exactly what I'd expected, Handsome in a generic way, built like someone who spent more time on his appearance than his intellect, and carrying himself with the swagger of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. "Porter," he said, setting down his weights and walking over with his hand extended. "Good to finally meet you." I shook his hand, noting the unnecessarily firm grip and the way he held eye contact just a little too long. Everything about him screamed insecurity masked as confidence. "Marcus," I said, "thanks for suggesting this meeting." "No problem. Like I said, we're all adults here." He led me to a quieter corner of the gym, near the windows where Tony would have a clear line of sight from the parking lot. "So," Marcus said, crossing his arms and leaning against a weight machine, "I guess you know about Zoya and me." "I do. And I guess you're pretty upset about it." "I'm disappointed," I said, "but not surprised." "Not surprised. Zoya's always been attracted to shiny things, new cars, expensive jewelry, men who look good in tank tops. I should have seen this coming." Marcus's smile faltered slightly. "Look, man, I'm not trying to hurt you here, but Zoya and we have something real, something you two never had." "What's that?" "Connection, chemistry, a future." "A future," I repeated. "That's interesting. What kind of future are you planning?" "The kind where she's with someone who can give her what she needs, someone who understands her world." "Her world being the bank, you mean? The Petrov family connections?" "Exactly. You never fit into that world, Porter. No offense, but you're just not sophisticated enough." "Sophisticated," I said. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Zoya needs someone who can match her ambitions, someone who can provide the lifestyle she deserves." "And you can provide that lifestyle?" Marcus straightened up, his chest puffing out slightly. "I make good money at the bank. I've got connections. I know how to treat a woman like Zoya." His posture was practiced confidence, shoulders squared, chin lifted as if he were delivering a pitch he'd rehearsed in the mirror more than once. "How much money?" "What?" The certainty flickered, just for a second. "How much do you make at the bank? Ballpark figure." I kept my tone casual, almost bored, watching him recalibrate. "I don't think that's really your business." His eyes narrowed, a defensive edge creeping in. "Humor me? 6 figures?" A pause, long enough to be telling. "Yeah, 6 figures." "Low 6 figures? High 6 figures?" "High enough," he said defensively, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "So probably around 80,000-90,000, maybe 100 on a good year with bonuses." I tilted my head slightly, as if doing mental math. "Something like that." The words came out reluctantly, stripped of bravado. I nodded thoughtfully. "And you think that's enough to provide the lifestyle Zoya deserves?" I let the word deserves hang there, heavy with implication. "It's about more than money, Porter. It's about compatibility, social compatibility." He latched onto the phrase as if it were a life raft. "Right. Social compatibility. That's what her family called it too." I smiled faintly, the memory still sharp. "Because it matters. You can't just throw money at a relationship and expect it to work." Interesting philosophy. So when you and Zoya get married, you'll be combining your high 5-figure income with her bank salary to create this sophisticated lifestyle? I gestured vaguely around us, the unspoken contrast doing the work for me. "We'll do fine." He said it quickly, like a reflex. "I'm sure you will. Of course, she might miss some of the things she's gotten used to." "Like what?" His confidence edged into irritation. "Like the $7 million she just walked away from." Marcus's expression shifted from confidence to confusion. "What $7 million?" "The $7 million I had in my account at her family's bank. The account I closed Saturday night after they finished explaining how temporary and unsuitable I was." I watched his face carefully as the words sank in. "You're lying." I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank receipt from Saturday night. $7,437,612.43. transferred in full to a competing institution. The numbers glowed coldly on the screen. Marcus stared at the receipt, his face cycling through disbelief, shock, and something that might have been panic. His mouth parted slightly, then closed again, no sound emerging. "That's just my liquid assets," I continued conversationally. "My total net worth is considerably higher, but most of it's tied up in investments and business ventures." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, as if the revelation were trivial. "Zoya never said—" His voice trailed off, thin and uncertain. "Zoya never knew. I thought she married me for love, not money. Apparently I was wrong about the love part, but at least I was right about her priorities." There was no anger in my voice now, just clarity. "This doesn't change anything," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction, the words sounding borrowed rather than believed. "Doesn't it? Because I'm betting when Zoya finds out what she walked away from, she's going to have some very serious second thoughts about her upgrade." I raised an eyebrow, inviting him to imagine that conversation. "She loves me. She loves the idea of you. The social compatibility, the family approval, the sophisticated lifestyle. But love doesn't pay for the kind of life she's accustomed to, and your bank salary isn't going to cover the gap." I could almost see the calculations starting behind his eyes. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what I'd told him. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "You know what the funny part is?" I said. "If she'd just been honest with me from the beginning, if she'd told me she was unhappy instead of having an affair, we probably could have worked things out. I might have even been willing to share custody of my bank account." I shrugged lightly. "And now?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "Now she gets to find out what it's like to be with someone who went to some random university and makes a random salary and can provide a random lifestyle." I stood up and stretched, joints cracking softly, enjoying the look of growing panic on Marcus's face as reality settled in. "Enjoy your upgrade," I said. "I hope it's everything you both thought it would be." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Marcus calling after me, his voice strained and urgent, but I didn't turn around. I had one more stop to make before the evening was over. Outside in the parking lot, Tony was waiting by his car with a camera and a satisfied expression, the late afternoon light reflecting off the windshield. "Get everything?" I asked. "Every word. The audio's crystal clear, and the photos show both your faces perfectly." He patted the camera bag like a proud accomplice. "Excellent. Email me copies tonight." "Porter, what exactly are you planning to do with this?" "I'm planning to make sure that everyone involved in this situation has access to all the relevant information before they make any permanent decisions." "And what does that mean in plain English?" "It means Marcus is about to have a very interesting conversation with his girlfriend about the financial realities of their relationship. And then? And then we see how much Zoya really values social compatibility when it comes with a side of financial struggle." I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, past the houses where normal people lived normal lives with normal problems. Porch lights flicked on one by one, sprinklers ticked rhythmically, and everything looked deceptively calm. My problems weren't normal anymore, but then again, neither was my solution. The temporary husband was becoming a permanent headache for everyone who'd thought they could discard him without consequences, and the consequences were just getting started. Tuesday morning brought the first signs that my strategy was working. I was in my home office, reviewing Tony's surveillance reports over coffee, when my phone rang. "Porter?" Zoya's voice was tight with stress. "We need to talk. Right now." "Good morning to you, too. Don't play games with me. Marcus told me about your conversation yesterday." "Did he? That was fast. I thought he might take some time to process the information before sharing it." "You told him about the money." "I told him the truth, something you apparently forgot to mention during your 3 months of relationship building." "I didn't know about the money." Exactly my point. You were willing to leave a marriage without bothering to understand what you were walking away from. That suggests either remarkable stupidity or remarkable indifference to your own financial security. This isn't about money, isn't it? Because according to Marcus, your relationship is based on social compatibility and his ability to provide the lifestyle you deserve. I was simply curious about how much lifestyle his bank salary could actually provide. The silence on her end stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. How much? She asked finally. How much what? How much money do you actually have? Why does it matter? You've already chosen your upgrade. You're building a future with someone who understands your world and can give you what you need. Porter, please, just tell me. 15 million, I said. Give or take a few million depending on market conditions. The sound she made might have been a gasp or a sob. I couldn't tell which. $15 million, she repeated. Conservative estimate. Some of my investments are difficult to value precisely, but that's the low end of the range. And you walked away from it to be with someone who makes maybe $100,000 a year and thinks that qualifies as sophisticated lifestyle money. I didn't know. No, you didn't. Because you never bothered to ask. You were so focused on what I couldn't give you that you never considered what I could. We can fix this, she said quickly. I can end things with Marcus. We can go to counseling. We can work this out. Can we? Because yesterday you were telling me that I didn't fit into your world and never would. Today you want to work things out. The only thing that changed between yesterday and today was your knowledge of my net worth. That's not true. It's completely true. You're not calling because you realized you love me. You're calling because you realized you made a very expensive mistake. Porter, please, can't we at least try? No, I said simply. We can't. Why not? Because I don't want to be married to someone who only values me for my money. If that's what you wanted, you should have married a bank account instead of a person. I hung up and immediately called Rebecca. She's panicking, I told my lawyer, trying to reconcile now that she knows what the divorce is going to cost her. That's expected. What did you tell her? I told her no. Good. Don't change your mind no matter how much she apologizes or promises to change. People like her don't change, they just get better at hiding their true motivations. What's our timeline looking like? I'm filing papers today. She'll be served tomorrow. After that we move into discovery, and that's when things get interesting. Interesting how? Because that's when we get to examine all of their financial records, communication records, and start building the case for what they were really planning. You think they were planning to take me for more than just half the assets? Porter, nobody has an affair for 3 months without making plans for the future. And when the future involves millions of dollars, those plans usually include ways to maximize the financial benefit. At noon, Tony called with an update. Your wife and Marcus had lunch together today, he said. Public place, lots of animated conversation, and I managed to get close enough to hear some of it. And she's not happy about the money situation. She kept asking why he didn't know, why he didn't ask, why he assumed you were broke. What did he say? He said it didn't matter because she'd already made her choice. Then she said maybe her choice was wrong. Trouble in paradise. It gets better. After lunch, she went back to the bank and requested a meeting with her uncle. I couldn't get close enough to hear that conversation, but she came out looking upset. Uncle Mikhail probably isn't thrilled about losing a $7 million account because of his niece's personal drama. That would be my guess. Oh, and one more thing. Marcus spent his afternoon updating his resume on job search websites. Really? Really. Looks like he's not feeling secure about his position at the bank. Smart man, smarter than I gave him credit for. At 3 p.m., I received a call from Uncle Mikhail himself. Porter, he said, his voice carrying the forced friendliness of someone trying to repair a damaged business relationship. I was hoping we could have a conversation. About what? About Saturday night. I think there may have been some misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? Perhaps we came across as more critical than we intended. Family gatherings can be stressful, and sometimes people say things they don't really mean. I see. So when you said I went to some random university and suggested Zoya could do better, you didn't really mean it? We were just concerned about Zoya's happiness. And now you're concerned about my banking relationship. Porter, you have to understand our position. Losing an account of your size reflects poorly on the entire family. I'm sure it does. Is there any way we could convince you to reconsider? Perhaps we could offer you some premium services, better interest rates, dedicated account management. You could offer me an apology. Of course. I apologize for any offense we may have caused. Not to me, I said. To Zoya. I'm sorry? You owe your niece an apology. You convinced her that her husband was worthless and encouraged her to find an upgrade. Now she's facing a divorce that's going to cost her millions of dollars because she took your advice. Porter, surely you're not going to punish Zoya for a family disagreement. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply declining to remain married to someone who thinks I'm temporary and unsuitable. But the money doesn't change who I am or where I went to school. If those things made me unsuitable as a husband on Saturday, they make me unsuitable today. We didn't mean. You meant exactly what you said. The only thing you didn't mean was for me to have enough money to make your opinion irrelevant. I hung up and made myself another cup of coffee. The phone rang again immediately. Porter, this is Mrs. Petrov Sr. I think we need to have a conversation. Do we? I believe there's been a terrible misunderstanding about Saturday evening. What kind of misunderstanding? We may have given you the impression that we don't approve of your marriage to Zoya. You gave me the impression that you think I'm beneath your family's standards and that Zoya could do better. We were simply trying to understand your background, your prospects, your ability to provide for our niece. And you concluded that I couldn't. We may have been premature in that assessment. You were accurate in that assessment. I can't provide the kind of social status your family values. I can't give Zoya the prestigious university credentials or the family connections that matter to you. But you can provide financial security. I can, but apparently financial security isn't enough if it comes from someone who went to some random university. Porter, please, can't we put this behind us? We can, but Zoya can't put her affair behind her, and I can't put her betrayal behind me. Affair? I paused, realizing that the family might not know about Marcus yet. You should probably ask Zoya about that. What affair? The affair she's been having with Marcus Radek for the past 3 months. The affair that your criticism of me helped to justify in her mind. The silence on the other end was profound. She's been having an affair? Mrs. Petrov Sr. asked finally. She has, with someone who fits your definition of suitable, someone who works at the bank, understands her world, and can provide social compatibility. But not financial security. Not even close. Oh dear. Indeed. So while I appreciate your newfound interest in my suitability as a husband, I'm afraid the position has been filled by someone more compatible. Porter, if we spoke to Zoya, if we explained that we were wrong about you weren't wrong about me. I am exactly who you thought I was. I just happen to also be wealthy. If that changes your opinion of my worth as a person, then your opinion isn't worth having. I hung up and turned off my phone. The Petrov family was in full panic mode, trying to undo damage they'd never expected to cause. But the damage wasn't to their relationship with me. It was to their relationship with Zoya's financial future. At 6 p.m., I drove to my lawyer's office to review the divorce papers before they were filed. This is comprehensive, I said, reading through the documentation. It needs to be. We're asking for full asset protection, spousal support denial based on adultery, and we're challenging any claim she might make to business assets or future earnings. What are her chances? If we can prove the affair was part of a plan to defraud you of marital assets, her chances are minimal. If we can't prove that, she might get something, but not much. And if she contests it, then we go to trial, and everything becomes public record. Her affair, your wealth, her family's role in encouraging the divorce. It won't be pleasant for anyone. But especially not for her. Especially not for her. I signed the papers and authorized Rebecca to proceed with filing. Tomorrow, Zoya would be officially served with divorce papers, and the temporary husband would become the permanent ex-husband. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We should talk. This doesn't have to get ugly. M. I pulled over and typed back, "You're right. It doesn't have to get ugly. It's going to get ugly anyway." His response came immediately. "What do you want?" I thought about that question for a moment. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? An acknowledgement that actions have consequences? "I want you to understand that some people aren't as temporary as you thought," I typed back. What does that mean? It means you picked the wrong marriage to interfere with. I put the phone away and continued driving home. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new complications, and new opportunities to demonstrate that the temporary husband had become a permanent problem for everyone who'd underestimated him. But tonight, I was content to sit in my house, surrounded by the life I'd built, and plan my next moves in the chess game that my marriage had become. The temporary husband was learning to enjoy the game. Thursday morning arrived with an unexpected development. I was reviewing financial reports when my doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. Through the window, I could see Zoya standing on my front porch, still wearing yesterday's clothes and looking like she hadn't slept. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Porter, please," she said immediately. "We need to talk. We've already talked, several times. Marcus broke up with me." "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not. You're right, I'm not." She looked past me into the house, and I could see her calculating whether she could push past me and force her way inside. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't what?" "Don't try to come in. This isn't your home anymore. It was our home for 5 years. It was, past tense. Now it's my home, and you're not welcome here. Porter, I made a mistake, a huge mistake. Can't you forgive me?" "I can forgive you. That doesn't mean I want to be married to you." "But the money was always here. You just didn't care enough to notice it." "I care now that you know about it." "That's not fair." I leaned against the doorframe and studied her face. She looked genuinely distressed, but I couldn't tell if she was upset about losing Marcus, losing me, or losing $15 million. "Tell me something," I said. "When Marcus broke up with you, what reason did he give?" "He said things were too complicated." "Complicated how?" "He said he couldn't compete with $15 million. "Interesting. So he broke up with you because I have money?" "He said I'd never really be over you as long as there was that much money involved." Smart man. Smarter than I thought. "So you see, it's not about the money. If it was about the money, I'd be trying to get back together with you for financial reasons. But Marcus left because of the money, which proves that my feelings are real." I stared at her for a long moment, impressed despite myself by the logic of her argument. It was twisted, but it wasn't entirely wrong. "Your feelings are real," I agreed. "But they're real feelings about a situation you created by having an affair for 3 months. I ended the affair." "No, Marcus ended the affair. You would have kept going if he hadn't found out about the money." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Because yesterday you were telling me how much you loved him and how you had a real connection. Today you're at my door asking for forgiveness. The only thing that changed was his decision to break up with you." She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her trying to find an angle that would work. "What if I sign a postnup?" she said finally. "A what?" "A postnuptial agreement. Something that protects your money but keeps us married. You want to sign away your rights to my assets in exchange for staying married? Yes. Why would you do that? Because I love you. You love me, but you want to make sure you can't benefit financially from that love? I want to prove that it's not about the money. I considered her proposal. It was actually clever. By volunteering to give up financial claims, she was positioning herself as someone whose motives were pure, but it was also revealing. What would you live on? I asked. My salary from the bank. The bank where you're currently under investigation for ethics violations? Her face fell. They're not going to fire me. Aren't they? Because I heard that having an affair with a coworker while married to someone else reflects poorly on the bank's family values. You heard that from who? From my lawyer, who's been researching employment law as it relates to moral turpitude clauses. Moral turpitude? It's a legal term for behavior that violates community standards of honesty and decency.